Sorry. Oh, wow. Sorry again. So this evening, there's a public hearing scheduled for 3 zoning bylaw amendments. The first one is application number ZBA-21-16FR, Sheila and David Niemeyer. The second one is application ZB-21-17FR, Ken Lacroix and Mireille Dupuis. And the third one is number ZB-21-19FR, 1721081 Ontario Corporation. The Planning Act requires that a public hearing be held before council decides whether or not to pass a zoning bylaw amendment. The public hearing serves 2 purposes. First, to present to council and the public the details and background to the proposed rezoning. And second, to receive comments from the public and agencies before council makes their decision. Monsieur Dumont will provide a summary of the applications. From there, the applicant will be requested to make a presentation virtually, followed by questions from the public virtually, either in favor or against the proposal. Council will then have the opportunity to question the applicant, the Director of Planning, or anyone giving presentation. The zoning bylaw amendment will then be considered by council later this evening. Monsieur Dumont, would you please advise how public notice was provided?
Notice of public hearing was posted in the municipal office and was sent by mail to the assessed owners within 120 meters of the property subject to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. The notices were sent on September 30th, 2021, being over 20 days prior to this evening's meeting. Included with the notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and a key map showing the location of the subject property.
I now declare this portion of the hearing to be a public hearing to deal with application number ZBA-21-6FR, Sheila and David Niemeyer. Monsieur Dumont, will you please summarize the purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to this application?
So to give everybody a little bit of background information as to how this process started, the consultants representing the owners of this subject property reached out to our office over a year ago. That was July 20th of 2020. So to give you a little bit of context, that's how the initialized contact in terms of what they were proposing. And at the time, I provided a critical path, basically just outlining what are the requirements going forward to for this proposal. During that year and a half, I received numerous phone calls from the purchaser as well as the owner as to what was going on, and I relayed that message back that, hey, you have an agent in place, and the last time last time I communicated with them was back in 2020. So August 17th, fast forward a year, August 17th, we finally, our board received a completed application, all the information. So from there I was able to reach out to the owners as well as the purchasers and advise them that the consultants that representing you have finally provided all the necessary information to move forward with this process. So that was August 17th of 2021 to where we are tonight. And to give a little bit more context, the planning board provided approvals of the severance application, which was held last Thursday, October 14th, 2021. So this application is a concurrent application, meaning there's a severance to cut some land from a property and add it to another property. So that was the purpose of Thursday's meeting. And tonight's meeting is to talk about the zoning of that land that's going to be added to that individual's property. So the lands are located on the north side of Heritage River Road and east of Smith Road. The subject property is approximately 1.5 kilometers from the village of Alban, Further east, the subject property is adjacent to Waterfront Residential properties. West of Smith Road is predominantly residential rural lots. As I noted earlier, I'll just give you a little bit of brief context of the severance application and the intent of that, which goes hand in hand with this application. The consent was to sever approximately 0.8 hectares from the above noted property and add such lands to the adjacent lands, which is 83 Gilbert Road. The balance of those lands will be approximately 30 hectares in area and a road frontage of approximately 816 meters on Smith Road and 420 meters on Heritage River Road. Once the lands are added and it's entirely one piece of property, it's going to be approximately 2.35 hectares in lot area with 140 meters of road frontage. The zoning bylaw application this evening is to ensure that once those lands are added to 83 Gilbert Road, it remains under one zone, meaning which is Waterfront Residential Zone. Because currently those lands that are being split are rural. So we want to ensure once they're added, it'll be all under the waterfront. And basically, as a condition of that severance, which was approved on Thursday night, the zoning bylaw is to be supported by council of the municipality of French River, which is a result of this application. So in terms of comments, Hydro 1 had no concerns with the application. Bell Canada had no comments or concerns. And the municipality of French River staff, which was circulated throughout the departments, had no objection to the severance. I did not receive any phone calls of any objections or concerns from the public. So overall, the application this evening is consistent with the provincial guidelines as well as our official plan for the municipality of French River, and conforms to the zoning bylaw 2014-23 for the municipality of French River and can be supported from a plan perspective.
Thank you, Monsieur Dumont. Is the applicant here? I see there's a Vanessa there. That's not for this application? Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the public? So, none. Are there any questions or comments from council, either to the applicant or to the Director of Planning? Seeing none, seeing that there are no further questions, then I declare this public hearing to be concluded, and it is now in order for a council member to make a motion for council to consider the application. So I need a mover and a seconder, Randy and Renee.
Thank you. It has duly been moved and seconded. Be it resolved that Bylaw 2021-60, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 2014-23 as amended, Sheila and David Niemeyer, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. I now declare this public hearing to be concluded. The zoning bylaw amendment, oh no, we've already done that. Please be advised that there is a 20-day appeal period during which time any person or public body may, no later than 20 days after the day that the giving of the written notice as required by section 3418 of the Planning Act is completed, appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal by filing with the clerk of the municipality a notice of appeal setting out the objections to the bylaw and reasons in support of the objection, accompanied by a fee prescribed under the Ontario Lands Tribunal. During this appeal period, no building permit may be issued or other work commenced. So we'll start with the second one. So I now declare this portion of the hearing to be a public hearing to deal with application number ZBA-21-17 FR, Ken Lacroix and Mireille Dupuis. Monsieur Dumont, would you please summarize the purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to the application?
So again, in terms of this application, I started this process with Dan Dupuis on May 5th, 2021, where the planning board received a proposal to create one rural lot. I provided my summary requirements What that means is I provide a letter to Dan saying, if you want to proceed with this severance, here are the requirements. Here's like a little checklist of things that you need to do in order for me to kind of process that application. So I provided that letter of requirements shortly after on May 17th to Dan. And on July 19th, I met with Dan at her office to review the draft applications, meaning Dan made the attempt to draft the severance application as well as the zoning bylaw application, where at that point in time, I kind of reviewed everything with him, provided some guidance and further assistance to those applications. So the end goal for Dan would be able to have me accept the severance application and zoning application, along with the additional information that would form part of that package, which would be the Sudbury District Health Unit, potable water, sewage hauler services. Those are some of the requirements that are part of a severance to create a new lot. So on August 3rd, Dan finally provided the final package to the planning board, and that's where I started the process for acting as to the planning board for the severance application, as well as the zoning bylaw, which is being heard this evening. So again, I will just kind of touch on the intent and purpose of the application for zoning bylaw for this one. So the Sudbury East Planning Board, the intent was to create that one rural lot, which was approved by the planning board on October 14th. As for the zoning, what's unique about this case where the lands are, it's partially zoned. The majority of the lands that he's looking at creating the majority is zoned rural. There's a small sliver within that same lot that he wants to create is zoned residential rural. So basically you have two zones in one property, and sometimes that can get messy in terms of what people want to do with a property, and because one zone says you can do A, B, C, D, but then the other zone says you can't do this, this, this. So it's prohibited to have that like split zoning or two different zones on one property. So it's more of like a housekeeping item than anything. So that was a result of maybe some past decisions when maybe there's a plan of subdivision along the waterway there. Maybe they had different ideas back in the day. I'm talking about maybe 20, 30 years ago. And then nothing's been done since then. And this is where they're looking at severing this lot. So as a result of this process for creating the lot, it's also an opportunity to clean this up from a zoning perspective. And so that was the message that I had to Dan. And so that's why we're here this evening, is to ensure that once that lot's created, it's all under one zone, which is rural. And so that's the intent of the application tonight. With respect to agency comments, Bell Canada had no concerns. Hydro One has no concerns with the application. Union Gas has no concerns. I did receive one phone call from a resident in the nearby area. That individual had called twice on two separate occasions and just wanted to, the individual was, they have a property on the other side of Blue Jay Road on the water side. So their concern was, what's the intent and purpose of the severance? And more importantly, what use of land are they going to be? Are they going to be doing farming activities? And do they have a right to do those? So I kind of went through the rural zone with that individual and said predominantly the entire parcel is intended to be rural and always has been rural. So as a result of that, they have a right to do these permitted uses in the zone. So I kind of just educated that individual as to how the bylaw is, what their right is, and if they had any more questions, I'd be more than happy to try to help them. So that was the intent of that discussion. Other than that, there was no other phone calls that were provided to our office. And for those reasons, as well as the planning board supporting the severance, the zoning bylaw does conform to provincial legislation, conforms to the official plan and the zoning bylaw 2014-23, and can be supported from a planning perspective.
Thank you. I'm assuming the applicant is not here, as well as there are no members of the public who wish to comment on this. Are there any comments from council? I have Councillor Randy.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Did the applicant represent their proposed plans for the lot? You said that the neighbor had a concern about some of the possibilities that could be used there. Did the applicant at any point say that they planned on leaving it vacant or building a house on it someday, or what was the applicant's plan? Did you know?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the applicant had indicated as through this consultation process that the intentions were to build a single-family home. That's what I'm aware of now, but I also made it very clear to that individual that did call that should they wish to follow the bylaw, they have a right to use those other permitted uses as well. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I declare this public hearing to be concluded, and now it's in order for council members to make a motion for council to consider the application. So moved by Dean and Bob.
It is duly moved in second, be it resolved that bylaw 2021-61, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 2014-23 as amended, Can Lacroix in Mireille's Puy, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Please be advised that there is a 20-day appeal period during which time any person or public body may, no later than 20 days after the day that the giving of the written notice as required by Section 3418 of the Planning Act is completed, appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal by filing with the clerk of the municipality a notice of appeal setting out the objections to the bylaw and the reasons in support of the objections, accompanied by fee prescribed under the Ontario Lands Tribunal. During this appeal period, no building permit may be issued or other work commence. Now we'll move on to the next amendment. So I now declare this portion of the hearing to be a public hearing to deal with application number ZBA-20-19 FR -1721081 Ontario Corporation. Monsieur Dumont, would you please summarize the purpose and the effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to the application?
Thank you. So again, in terms of how this process started, the consultants, so the owners reached out to a professional consultant that specializes in land development. So I believe that's Vanessa Smith, who's the agent participating in this evening's meeting. So Tulloch Engineering was representing the owners through this process. So this process started back when, on March 24th to be exact. So on March 24th, the planning board received a proposal from Tulloch Engineering where they they basically provided a complete sketch and requested my formal comments as to what would be required to get where we are today, basically deeming those applications complete. Again, a little bit more context was this was a concurrent application, so there is three severances in the retained along with the zoning bylaw tonight. The three severance applications were approved by the planning board last Thursday on October 14th. And so I'm just going to dive in just to give you a little bit of context of the severances and tie that in with the zoning and then go from there. So the intent was there's three lots created, lot A, B, and C. Most of the lots were right around the residential rural requirement, which is the 0.8 hectares or just about 2 acres. The bylaws recognizing that the 60 meters is a requirement for frontage. Now they're just shy of that. It ranges in the 50-meter range. So part of this bylaw is recognizing the reduced frontages. And so the bylaws recognizing reduced frontages in the zone because it was rural zone. Now we're looking at a residential rural zone for these three lots. And when you go through that process, started back on March 24th, and when the consultants request like what those requirements are, you might ask yourself, well, that's taken some time. And the reason that's taken some time as part of that requirement list was, for example, There's a place in the official plan that talks about significant habitat of endangered and threatened species. So, and it explicitly states that, if there is any of those species that are endangered or threatened, that there's no development to occur unless the ecological function of adjacent lands can be evaluated. So it needs to be evaluated to determine whether there is no negative impact or if there is an impact. So that takes time, because then the consultant has to go back to their environmental team, hire a biologist, and do a desktop analysis about my findings. So as a result of that taking time and having that recommendation as part of this process, the consultants and their biologists determine that the residential development beyond 30 meters of the wetland, because there's an existing wetland there that has existing ecological functions, is not expected, which is very key, this next point, to negatively impact the ecological function of the area to support the mill snake. So basically, they've done their due diligence. I brought this as a concern, and their professional biologist says, as long as there's no development within 30 meters of development, meaning like building a house or a detached garage afterwards. So it was comforting in knowing that information. So that's why it takes some time sometimes with some of these applications. Other than that, if there's any further questions about the intent and purpose, again, just to quickly summarize, rural lands, we're subdividing into 3 lots, and as a result, they're going to be smaller lots. When they're smaller lots, you have to rezone it to a residential rural zone. With respect to agency comments, the municipality of French River had no objection to the severances and zoning. They also stated that part of that process, parkland dedication policy, is applicable. All that means is when you create a lot, there's a 5%. That 5% is through law, and it's applicable to the creation of new lots. And that valuation is determined by the clerk, and then and there's a fund, and that money goes to like park and recreational purposes. So that's the intent of that. Sudbury District Health Unit provided supportive comments for the severances. Bell Canada, Hydro One, and Union Gas had no objections. I did not receive any phone calls in the area from the public. So with everything summarized and supported from the planning board too, from a severance perspective, everything conforms to our provincial, local regulations, and therefore can be supported from a plan perspective.
Thank you. I believe that we have Ms. Smith representing the applicant tonight. So I'll turn over the mic to you. Yes, we're okay. Thank you, Ms. Smith. I don't believe we have anybody from the public on this application. Now I'll turn it over to council. Any questions? Councillor Randy?
Through you, Madam Mayor. I believe recently this year we did a severance for the 3 lots above this lot. Was that to the same person, same owner? And if so, that 3 lots that we previously severed this year and that subdivision, how much vacant inventory is still there?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the first part of the question, just to give you a little bit of the history, you are correct, Mr. Aslett. So there was 3 separate severances not on the same road, but if I recall, just north of it. That all formed as a original block of land as part of the subdivision at the time that was registered. So part of that process was the consultants needed to deem that block to no longer form part of that subdivision. When they chose to do that, that was one separate application. Then afterwards was the severance 3 applications, which was supported by the planning board and actually has been finalized. So meaning I issued the legal documentation to the lawyers. So you can buy a property, I can buy a property, and Melanie can buy a property. So that's all been completed from that perspective. Now, with respect to your second point about the inventory, I wouldn't be able to speak to that. Maybe the consultant, because it's their clients, as to what has further happened in terms of development, could maybe provide some insight regarding that.
And is this all the same client, though, I think was the other question.
And lastly, correct. So this is all the same client with respect to this property.
Ms. Smith, did you have any comments with regards to see how much inventory is left in that area? Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, then I declare this public hearing to be concluded and a lot of closer. Okay, I'm okay. The zoning bylaw amendment will be considered right now. So I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Randy, seconded by Vanine.
It is duly moved and seconded. Be resolved that bylaw 2021-62, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 2014-23 as amended, 1721081 Ontario Inc., be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. I see you, Dave, down there, by the way. Please be advised that there is a 20-day appeal period during which time any person or public body may, no later than 20 days after the day of the giving of the written notice as required by Section 3418 of the Planning Act, is completed. Appeal to the Ontario Lands Tribunal by filing with the municipal clerk a notice of appeal setting out the objections to the bylaw and the reasons in support of the objections, accompanied by the fee under the Ontario Land Tribunal. During this appeal period, no building permit may be issued or other work commenced. All right, so now we move to adjournment. That's it for tonight. All right, so I need a mover and a seconder to adjourn. Bob and Dean.